Can you spot the twist in today's opening story? Stay tuned to the end of the episode to find out the answer. My younger sister was asleep underneath the heated table downstairs. The top half of her body was sticking out from underneath it, and, thinking to play a trick on her, I leaned down by the other side of the table and reached in to grab her legs. As I did, she suddenly sat up. "Ah, it's time to go!" she screamed before running upstairs. I let go of the legs and frowned. Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Welcome to October, the spookiest month of the year. For those of us in the West, anyway. Did you know that every single day this month, you can get a brand new Kowabana episode over at our Patreon? For as little as $1, you can get 31 brand new and exclusive stories. That's one each and every day for the entire month of October. The theme is scary school stories, so if you'd like to help support this podcast, as well as get a bunch more stories that you can listen to each day, or save up for the equivalent of a brand new episode each week, head over to patreon.com/TaraADevlin, or you can find the link on kowabana.net. All of my Japanese horror books are also on sale this month, so make sure to check out kowabana.net to find out which books and when. This week you'll find several Kowabana and Toshiden volumes on sale for just 99 cents each, with new books going on sale each Friday all throughout this month. If you've missed any books or you've been debating checking some out, now's your chance to pick them up for real cheap. So, the theme of this week's episode is the unexplainable. Have you ever had something happen to you that, no matter how you look at it, you just can't explain? When I was a teenager, my mother used to say that there was a ghost in her room. Now, I don't believe in ghosts, but I'm still petrified of them, if that makes any sense. I never believed her, and I figured she said it to keep me out of her room. But there was one experience that briefly made me question that. I was asleep in my own room one night when something suddenly smacked me on the head, really hard. Like, hard enough to wake me up. I sat up and looked around, but nothing was there. I was alone in my room, but my head hurt from where it had been whacked. To this day, I can't explain it, and while I don't think it was a ghost, why would a ghost hit me in the head? I still have no idea what it could have been. This week, we're going to look at all sorts of strange and unexplainable stories, starting with the following young man who worked as a bathroom installer. While working in a house deep in the mountains one night, he spots something that shouldn't exist. Something that shouldn't be. Find out what in My First Ghostly Experience. At present, I work in construction. I install system bathrooms, and generally we have to get the job done in a single day, so we often work until late into the night. This all took place when I was still the new guy, installing a bathroom in a single house in the countryside. Work proceeded as normal, but it was taking some time, so we were still working as midnight rolled around. Usually, if work goes past 8 p.m, it's a bother to the nearby residents, so we leave the rest for the next day. But this was out in the mountains. If we finished work that night, we'd have the next day off, so we contacted the company in charge and let them know we'd be continuing. At around 10 p.m, my colleague said that he had some stuff to do at home, so he wanted to leave early. I was still new to the job, but it wasn't like I was useless. We always finished up and then left together, but on this particular day he left early, and I stayed behind to finish. About an hour after he left, I stopped to take a break. All that was left was to install the bathroom mirror. Once that was done, I sighed in relief. Finally, it was finished. I glanced in the mirror, and when I saw the scenery outside reflected in it, I froze. A woman was standing there. We were deep in the mountains, late at night. There were no other houses around. I thought maybe I was seeing things, but I grew scared and hurried to finish cleaning up. First I closed the windows and then I packed all our tools up, doing my best not to look in the mirror. Then, right as I was finishing up, I saw the woman's silhouette in the mirror. She was getting closer. I ran out of the room in a panic, quickly jumping into my car and taking off. As I hit the road and my nerves calmed down, I grew even more scared, wondering how on earth that thing could have been out there at that time of night. Then, I realized something even worse. At my company, when you finish a job, you're supposed to leave the written guarantee at the bottom of the bathtub. I'd completely forgotten. I'd worked so late into the night, and the next day was supposed to be my day off. I didn't want to come back again just to leave a piece of paper. I decided what to do, but in the end, I decided to go back. When I got there, I took the papers out of the car boot, unlocked the front door, then went straight for the bathroom. As soon as I put the papers in the tub, my phone rang. Ah! My heart pounded painfully. I was so surprised, and I broke out into a sweat. It was a friend from back home, someone very familiar with ghostly encounters, and he even did fortune-telling every now and then. Considering what had happened earlier, he was just the person I wanted to talk to, so I quickly answered. "Hey, you're up in the mountains now, aren't you? It's dangerous up there. You better come home right away." I didn't even get the chance to say hello. I rushed out of the house and back into the car. But this time, it refused to start. Finally, after it felt like my heart was going to crawl out of my throat, the car started and the headlights turned on. A rather tall woman in a dress stood in front of the car. I reversed out of there as fast as I could, driving the rest of the way home in a daze. A few days later, I told my colleague everything that happened after he left. His face went pale. So it really was. Look, listen closely. According to him, he was working at the foot of the mountain on a different job when the same thing happened to him. He saw a woman reflected in the mirror. He didn't want to work up there late at night again, although he really did have other plans that night when he left early. According to the friend who called me, there was a family who lived in the area long ago who died in a family suicide. Those spirits had merged and become the woman that I saw standing before me. Until that point, I didn't believe in ghosts at all. I even thought that all the programs on TV were just fake. But after having an experience of my own, I changed my mind. I never want to see anything like that ever again. I'd like to give a small warning for this next story. It gets rather raw in parts, and it features talk and visual depictions of suicide. This story both moved and terrified me as I read it, but it heads into some dark places, so if you'd rather not hear it, please feel free to skip ahead to the next story. This story is about a young man whose family is approached by a woman who wants them to join her new religion. When they refuse, Things start to go from bad to worse, one by one, as each of the family members are taken out in mysterious ways. Why is this happening to them? And will any of them survive? This one's called Total Family Annihilation. When I was in elementary school, some woman visited our house from a new religion. At first, my mother gently turned her away, but she kept returning once every 3 days, strongly urging my mother to join her new religion. My mother wasn't a very strong-willed woman, so she listened to her each time before apologizing and telling her that not this time. The woman kept returning so often that one day my father got angry and told her to go away. "Even if you get upset, it won't stop us," the woman said. "It's fate that you will join us," she said before leaving. My father called the police, just in case, and after that, a police officer patrolled the area each day. Then, 1 week later, my mother disappeared. The woman came to see us again after she was gone. "See, I told you, didn't I? She hasn't returned because you don't believe." I was at home alone with my older sister and younger brother at the time, so I was terrified. "I'll come back again when your father's home," the woman said, and then left. As soon as she was gone, my sister called our dad. He said he'd be home right away and hung up. I tried to calm down my crying brother, wondering myself when our mother would come back. But she never did. My sister called her school teacher and let them know what was happening. She informed them that she wouldn't be in for a while, and both the teacher and the police officer who patrolled the neighborhood came to check on us often. Our father worked one of the higher-up managerial positions in his company, and it was the accounting season, so he was unable to get any time off work. By this time, I was in junior high school and a club member, but things being what they were, I started going home right after class ended. My teacher was worried about me too. For a while, things went on with just us 3 siblings. Every now and then, our sister's teacher took us out to get some food, and just having him there was reassuring. For a while, the woman stopped coming to see us, and things were peaceful. We still had no idea where our mother was. It had been a while since we filed the missing persons report, but there had been no progress on the matter. The police came around every now and then to ask us how things were going, but we hadn't heard anything from our mother, so there was nothing we could do. As much as we didn't want to consider the possibility, it was looking more and more likely that our mother wouldn't return home. My school's sports day rolled around. For the first time in a while, all of us let loose and had some fun. We went to a family restaurant together after, and then went home. The front door was open. Footprints led to the family altar room. "Thief!" my father screamed. But it wasn't a thief. The altar in the altar room had been sealed shut with blue packing tape. My sister screamed and started shaking. My brother burst into tears. It was so strange. Even my father was dumbfounded. I wondered if whoever had done it wasn't still in the house, so we huddled together and my father called the police. The officer who patrolled the neighborhood arrived first, and then several others followed. They questioned our father on the spot, while my brother and I carried our sister to her room. Once there, all 3 of us bawled our eyes out. It turned out that nothing had been stolen. Home invasion was still a crime, however, and the police were aware of the religious woman, so they questioned others in the neighborhood. They soon discovered that a black van had been seen parked in front of our house while we were all at my school sports festival. A month later, we received a call that our mother had been found dead in another prefecture. She was found in the mountains somewhere in Gunma Prefecture, hanging from a tree. Her hands were tied behind her back. Even stranger, the rope wasn't bound tightly around her hands, so if she wanted to break free of it, she easily could have. I don't really remember much of what happened at the time. I heard about it from my father much later. The police were treating it as a murder, not a suicide, but they couldn't find a single clue as to what happened. Our mother had been gone for close to a year. What had she done during that time? And what type of lifestyle had she led? While that investigation went nowhere, my sister was the next one to be attacked. She was attacked by a man on her way home from shopping and was saved by a passerby. The man who attacked her was mentally challenged, and while his parents had turned away for just a second, he took that opportunity to attack my sister. He dragged her into the toilets from a well-populated area, and the fact that nobody there tried to stop him still boils my blood. I hate them all. I know it's useless, but I can't forgive them. My sister got back on her feet and started living her life again, but in the end, it was no good. When I got home from school one day, I found her lying on the floor in her room, yellow foam coming out of her mouth. She tried to overdose on sleeping pills. Even now, I still can't forget the sight. She was taken to the hospital immediately, but she made another attempt, and this time, she couldn't be helped. My father quit his job after her funeral. They paid him a rather large severance payment, but he spent his time in a daze. He'd only answer my brother and I in small grunts. It was thanks to the kind old ladies in the neighborhood who brought us food that we were able to even eat dinner. One day, I came home and found my father lying prostrate in front of the family altar. He was drunk. I was so upset that I pressed my head to his back and cried. I cried and cried and cried. I wasn't the type of kid who ever cried, so my father was surprised. He apologized and started crying with me. We didn't bring up anything about the police's lack of progress on the case. I started high school, and my younger brother started junior high. Using the skills he developed at work, our father started working from home. His previous company gave him a lot to do. I did all the housework myself. I wanted my brother to focus on his study and to be able to take part in his school club. I wanted his junior high life to be as normal as possible, but it wasn't to be. On his way home from school, my brother was hit by a car and killed. He got squished between the car and a wall. The driver was a young man, and at first he testified that he'd taken his eyes off the road for just a moment, but he later revealed that he'd been paid a large sum of money to do the job. The person who had asked him to do it was the woman who kept coming to our house, asking us to join her religion. The woman was arrested. Her reason was that she hated us for not listening to her. But there were a lot of points that didn't make sense. First of all, the woman wasn't part of any existing religion. She had created her own and was the only member. The person who entered our house that time was also her. Then things got even more complicated. There were too many footprints in the house that time to be a single person, yet she refused to answer any further questions about it when asked by the police. She never revealed the truth. She didn't have anything on her to prove her identity either. They didn't know anything about her. All they knew was that she had a lot of money, but they didn't even know where that came from. They didn't know anything. It sucked. I was pissed. The woman ended up dying while in custody. Apparently, it was a heart attack. Our father suggested we move. I agreed. That house held far more sad memories than good ones. With everything that had gone on, we didn't want to make things worse for the neighbours either. We only had the basics at home anyway, so preparations for the move proceeded quickly. With our move taking place the following Thursday, my father and I went to the nearby public bath. The water was warm. It cheered me up a little. For the first time in a while, my father smiled. On our way home, we heard sirens in the direction of our house. It was on fire. I was speechless. My father was dumbfounded. He stared at the house, and all he could mutter was, "Ah, the house." The flames reflected violently in his eyes. It was arson. In the cinders, they found materials that had been soaked in kerosene. They never caught who did it. The flames damaged the neighbours' houses as well. My father apologized to them, but the old woman hugged me tight and cried in my stead. We moved. It wasn't long before my father lost it. As he worked from home, he carried on like Mum, my sister, and even my younger brother were still there with us. Apparently, they spoke with him, joking like they used to all the time. To tell you the truth, I saw all this with my own two eyes. I saw it, but it was just a hallucination. That's what I told myself, and so I ignored it completely. One night, my father and I were eating dinner together when I heard my mother's voice come from the kitchen. "Ah, we ran out of soy sauce." My father and I looked at each other. He'd heard it too. I'll go and get some now then," my dad said. Suddenly his face turned serious, and his hands found their way around my neck, tightening harder and harder. When he came back to, he looked at me horrified. "Oh, what am I doing?" He took off running towards the veranda, and just like that, threw himself over the edge. My father died. I was the only one left. My uncle took me in, and I graduated from high school, got work in the city, and started living by myself. Quite a bit of time has passed since then. This year, I'll be turning 32. I'm still not married, and I live alone. Every now and then my family come to visit. They look just like they did back then, and it takes me back to when I was a child. The saddest part is that they never age. They always stay the same. I went to the hospital. They told me I'm mentally unstable. They gave me medicine, but seeing it reminds me of my older sister that time, so I can't take it. That's the end of this story. I've reached my limit. My entire family was destroyed. I'm not considering ending it all, but when I think about that woman's curse, I know that someday it'll all be over for me too. My reason for telling you all this is that I want to leave a record of myself, my family, and the time we spent living in Chiba Prefecture. The apartment I lived in for most of my time in Japan had thin walls. Very thin walls. I could hear what the neighbors were watching, and if I listened closely enough, I could hear what they were talking about as well. This isn't uncommon for Japanese apartments, and you kinda just have to put up with it. The man in this next story, however, gets a little more than he bargained for when he discovers the source of the strange voices he's been hearing at night. Find out what in Noisy Voices. This happened around the time I entered university and started living alone for the first time. I was playing games at home alone one night when I could hear a bunch of voices making a fuss downstairs. I wondered if the person downstairs had some guests over, so I listened closer. It didn't sound like just a few people. It sounded like a lot of people. It might have been my imagination, but it sounded like the hustle and bustle of a busy train station, or something like that. Maybe they're watching something on TV, I wondered, before quickly putting it out of my mind. And yet the voices didn't stop, even once it was time for me to go to sleep. They weren't that loud, but I could still hear them at 3 a.m, and it bothered me so much that I barely got any sleep that night. After that, nearly every night I could hear the noisy voices from roughly 10 p.m. till 3 a.m, making it difficult for me to sleep. Fed up, I decided to go downstairs and tell them to be quiet. I pressed the doorbell, and the resident soon appeared. He seemed to be another student, 2 or 3 years older than me. I was about to open my mouth to tell him that I lived upstairs when he beat me to the punch. "What the hell are you being so noisy about every night?" he said. To make things easier to understand, I'll call him Sato from here on out. I didn't know what he was talking about, so I told him everything from the beginning, and how I was hearing a bunch of voices coming from downstairs almost every night. For Sato's part, he claimed that he could hear the voices coming from upstairs, and he was about ready to complain to the landlord about it. Listening to his story, I couldn't understand what was going on, but a bad feeling came over me. They were clearly the voices of people, and we'd heard them numerous times, so we weren't just hearing things. And Sato was absolutely certain that it was a large bunch of people. After a few moments of silence, Sato spoke up again. "I wonder if there's something in the roof. Do you want to check it out?" Before I could say anything, he grabbed a light. But I didn't want him making such decisions for me. What if I accidentally went through the roof or caused some other type of damage? I thought that was best left to the landlord, and I suggested that we explain it to them first. Sato was raring to go, but I managed to convince him. Thinking they would find us suspicious if I mentioned the voices, I told them that I could hear some strange sounds in the floor. They seemed to think it might be mice, so they agreed to send someone out in the next few days to check it out. I felt like I was lying or hiding something from them, and I felt bad about it, but Sato disagreed. I mean, It's not like you were lying when you said you were hearing strange things in the floor. And they're sending someone out now, so what's the problem? On the day the realtor was scheduled to come out, Sato came up to my apartment early. Apparently something had come up, and he wouldn't be able to stick around. But he said to tell the realtor that it would be fine to enter his apartment with the master key. Why don't you call and tell them that yourself? I thought. But I told him okay and then waited for them to arrive. The realtor arrived with an exterminator just before lunch. He informed me that he was unable to get in contact with Sato and was wondering if I'd heard anything. I told him about what happened earlier that morning, and although he seemed troubled by it, he went down to check his room too. Apparently, the only way to check the space between the first and second floors was from the bathroom in Sato's apartment. Even though Sato had said to use the master key to get in, when we reached his apartment, the door was already unlocked. Of course, I couldn't just freely go into his apartment myself, so I waited outside while the realtor and exterminator went in. Whoa! Are you okay? I suddenly heard a voice from inside. I opened the door and both the realtor and exterminator were pale. Call the police, they said. To cut a very long story short, they found Sato dead in his bathroom. Everything went downhill after that. The police soon arrived, followed by the ambulance. The police asked me all sorts of questions. I told them that Sato didn't seem especially strange or suspicious when I talked to him that morning. I told them about the noises and they investigated the space between the floors, but whether they found anything in there or not, they didn't tell me. In the end, I had no idea what really happened to either Sato or the voices. That night, I was so tired that I decided to go straight to bed. Right as I got under the covers, I heard the voices again. Only this time, there was something different about them. I don't know exactly what it was, but something was off. I soon realized what it was. I was used to hearing the voices coming from below me, but now they were beside me. All this time, I'd only heard them through the floor, but now I could hear them clearly, like they were right there in the room with me. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to open my eyes and look in their direction, but I was scared. Even so, I still wanted to know what exactly they were. I readied myself, sat up, and turned to look. I saw something unbelievable. A single man in a suit was standing there. Although to say he was standing wouldn't be entirely accurate. It was like the top half of his body was sticking out of water, or like a body was growing out of the floor. That wasn't where the strangeness ended. His eyes rolled violently in different directions, and his lips moved to match the violent speed of the words coming out of them. They were the noisy voices I'd been hearing all this time. I couldn't move. I stared at the man in the suit, dumbfounded. And as my eyes grew used to the darkness, I noticed something else strange. It was Sato. Sato's face was sticking out of my floor, his eyes wide open and focused on the roof, his mouth opening and closing just like a fish. The moment I saw him, I knew he was dangerous. My brain stopped working, and grabbing my phone and wallet, I fled outside in my pajamas. I spent the rest of the night in a manga cafe, and first thing in the morning, I called the real estate. I told them I couldn't live there anymore, and I wanted to move right away. When I arrived at the real estate, I told the person in charge that I wanted everything completed as soon as possible. Even though it was so sudden, he was acting rather strange and, for some reason, he really didn't want me to move. Finding it suspicious, I stubbornly stood my ground, and it appeared that they thought I was involved in Sato's death somehow. That was why they wouldn't let me move so easily. Of course, why wouldn't they think that? I was the last person to see him after the noise complaints, and I told them about the events of that morning. Objectively, however, there wasn't a shred of evidence, and Sato's death remained a mystery. Because I rushed over and wanted to move out so quickly, they started to suspect me. And of course, they weren't the only ones. The police soon suspected me as well. Even so, there was no way I was returning to that apartment. There was no way I could spend a second longer in that place where I'd seen such a strange, creepy thing. It was obvious that the guy in the suit had something to do with Sato's death. Maybe I was his next target. With things being as they were, I absolutely did not want to go back there. I didn't know whether they'd believe me, but I told them everything that had happened up until that point. They said that it wasn't just up to them, however, and I'd have to talk to the police first. Resigning myself, I called the number on the card I received the day before and went down to the station to explain everything. When I got there, I told them the same thing I'd told the real estate. Of course, they didn't believe me. On the contrary, they seemed to think I was insane, and the endless days of no sleep had gotten to me, so I blew up at them. "Then why don't you go there and spend the night then, huh?" I screamed, throwing my apartment key at them. Thinking back on it later, I was making an extremely unreasonable request, but once the officers had calmed me down, they agreed to allow me to move, as long as it wasn't too far away, and if they called, I had to promise to answer it. I moved out, and a while later, I heard that they ruled Sato's death as a suicide. It seemed they no longer suspected me. A short while after hearing that, the police called me in again. Apparently, they'd found Sato's diary on his computer, and it mentioned the man in the suit that I'd spoken to them about. They wanted to ask me about him one more time. I had no idea who that man was, however, and neither did they. But there were a few things I discovered. According to Sato's diary, he'd seen the man in the suit before I went down to complain about the noise, and he knew that the voices were coming from him. He wrote repeatedly about how the man in the suit was evil, and that Sato felt like he was in danger. If he knew all that, then why did he act like he didn't know anything? The police said nothing, but perhaps they found something in the roof that was related to it. Perhaps Sato also knew about it, and for some reason tried to drag me into it. Even now, I still don't know the full truth. Our last story for this week features a strange young boy whose words and actions make no sense, and in hindsight, only become even more strange. Find out why in The Strange Ensign. This happened more than 20 years ago, when I was still a junior high student. There were only a few days until summer vacation ended, and my mum drove my younger brother and I to the local pool. I don't remember the details exactly, but I think our mum wanted us to enjoy what little was left of the holidays together. So, we arrived at the pool. Our mum sat by the side of the pool while my brother and I played in it. Before long, someone called my name, and when I turned in the direction of the voice, I saw another kid from my grade standing nearby. I'll call him Ensan. We weren't exactly close friends, nor were we even in the same class. All I knew about him was that one of my friends went to elementary school with him and mentioned him a few times. That was it. "Fancy meeting you here," he said. "Can I join you?" Of course, I had no good reason to refuse him, and I thought that it would probably be more fun with an extra person anyway, rather than just my brother and I. So, the three of us played in the pool together. As evening approached, it was finally time to go home. Ensan was at the pool by himself, so we agreed to drop him off in our car. Mum asked him for directions as she drove. "Turn right here. Turn left. Go straight." He told her the way to go, and although Mum followed him, I soon realized that something was wrong. No matter how you looked at it, we were going in circles. Mum realized too, and when she pointed it out, Ensan replied, "But this is the right way." Mum did as he said, but once again we ended up on the same road. "Stop messing around," I said, blowing my top. "Sorry, but my parents said that when I come home, I'm only allowed to take this road." Then he turned to my mother and muttered, "You can drop me off at the tunnel up ahead." He got out of the car at the tunnel, and we said our goodbyes. "Wait, are there even any houses past the other end of the tunnel?" my mother said after he got out of the car. I shook my head, but come to think of it, I didn't know either. Summer holidays ended and we went back to school. On the first day back, I told my friend about running into Ensan at the pool. He revealed that both of Ensan's parents had died when he was young, and his grandmother was raising him now. Even more shocking, his grandmother had died during the holidays. She died only a few days before we ran into Ensan at the pool. Thinking about it rationally, it made no sense for someone to be playing at a pool right after a close family member had died. After his grandmother died, some other relatives had taken him in, so he wouldn't be joining us at school for the new term. Of course, they'd already taken him in, so he wasn't at school that day. After that day at the pool, I never saw Ensan again. In the end, I never really figured out what happened that day. Why did he go to the pool alone to play after his grandmother had died? What did his long-dead parents mean by, "You can only take this road"? And why did we keep driving around in circles? Did Ensan's strange conduct have something to do with his grandmother's death? I still have no idea. And was it even really Ensan that we met at the pool to begin with? The more I think about it, he should have been with his other relatives at that time. But on the outside, it really did look like Ensan. And he knew me as well. There's still so many things I don't understand. So did you catch the twist in today's opening story? It's a simple one, but Easy to miss if you don't pay attention to the timing. The brother grabs his sister's legs under the heated table. Or so he thinks. She gets up and runs upstairs when she realizes the time, and then he lets go of the legs he was holding. His sister is already gone by that point, so whose legs was he holding? And that brings us to the end of this week's episode. Don't forget to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for 31 days of Kowabana this month. And also, keep an eye on Kowabana.net for when my books go on sale this month. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who has supported me over the years. I released my first book almost 2 years ago to the day, and this podcast started not long after. Your support means the world to me, and I hope you have an awesome and spooky October. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to Kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to Kowabana.net now.